Once upon a time, in a world very different from our own, there lived a couple people, just two. Their names were Adam and Eve. The only problem with our story is that the beginning is too far back.
Forward a couple years, a lot of years, and we see the fall of Rome and how the Germanic tribes stamped down the Romans and began to unite other Germanic tribes together. They continue to stamp them down until one Germanic tribal leader, Charles Martel, comes along and creates the Frankish dynasty. He starts the line of kings.
During the Frankish dynasty, there was a king named Charlemagne. He was named Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III, but it didn't mean much because Pope Leo did not give him any power, just a fancy title. There lied the end to kings for a couple years and the start of emperors. The emperors became figureheads, the Pope just pulling their strings. The downfall of the emperors, the rising of kings and queens came again, before they swarmed the lands once more.
With the kings and queens came the separation of land into several chunks, some larger than others. One chunk, called England, started an empire once again, and a parliament, also creating a new model army by Oliver Cromwell. This army was different than the previous army because they were older and more trained. They are also better equipped, which made them harder to defeat than the previous younger soldiers who fought. The navy of the Britons was highly important as well. They had the best navy in the world and were able to protect themselves during the Spanish Armada by sending fire ships against the Spanish navy and sinking a lot of their boats. 187 years later.
Fast forward to the American Revolution, the English had colonized America, and they were buds until they had a falling out. The falling out consisted of they wanting freedom because they never had a say. They didn't like the Stamp Act, didn't like the tax laws, and really did not like King George III. Mainly because he suppressed American rights and imposed taxes on them without representation.
The warfare previously consisted of two countries lining up in rows as they waited for the other side to shoot before they replied in their own bullets, which was rather stupid. The winning side was the side that did not surrender, so basically, whichever side could stand being shot at more. But then came the Americans, who decided to declare war on Britain. They studied with the Native Americans and got a tactic called the guerrilla warfare. In this tactic, they would hide in the trees and attack while out of sight. This was rather startling to the British because it went against their normal formalities. In the end, America won. No big deal, just a large shocker to the world.
After the American Revolution came the gunpowder warfare. This was a period where gunpowder was used more frequently than other methods. It came around specifically during the period of the French Revolution. Napoleon disintegrated the Holy Roman Empire while creating his empire because he didn't like the fact that someone else besides himself was called emperor. After he was brought down by Great Britain, Prussia, Russia, Sweden, Austria, and other German states who aren't important enough to have their names remembered, There were no more emperors, only monarchs, presidents, and parliament remained in political power.
Then came along the industrialization and the decrease of farmland of the world, in particular Germany. They unified and made wicked awesome weapons that were really good. Germany changed war because they made weapons that could shoot far. War was no longer a hand-to-hand combat sort of deal, rather a point-and-shoot deal. With this new type of war, telecommunications were important because they could send messages long distances in short periods of time, allowing troops to be organized and ready to fight in an instant.
Then Europe entered war and everything changed. Previously, alliances were no big deal. It was basically two countries on an open field killing each other. But now there were multiple countries on multiple fields fighting each other because they were friends with the main instigators. Not only was the fighting on a larger scale, but because Germany had created so many good weapons, the rest of the world needed to catch up and create really mean and powerful weapons as well. These weapons included machine guns, poisonous gas, heavy artillery, tanks, trenches, barbed wire, submarines, and so much more. One of those tactics making the war a three-dimensional war was the airplanes, also the submarines, but hey, only the Germans used those.
During the beginning of the war, the airplanes were used to transport goods and weaponry to troops. They didn't really have anything on them that could harm others, besides crashing. The pilots were not really protected well, because they were just transporters, like trains. As airplanes passed each other in the air, even if they were enemies, they would give a wave to each other, like Jeep owners do today. But as the war evolved, and it didn't end, tensions began to rise, and guns were placed on the planes. People who once waved to each other now shot guns at each other, making a new type of warfare, dogfighting. They would chase each other in the sky until they shot down their opponent. One of them crashed, or the other got away.
World War I, America got sucked into because the Germans wouldn't leave them be, was an eye-opener. War was once glorious. It was a hand-to-hand combat where people could prove their strength and bravery by rushing head-on into a fight. But with all the new machinery added together with old, outdated tactics, casualties grew to unprecedented amounts. The population in countries alone was significant, and the whole world population dropped about 2%. No longer was war a magnificent thing. No longer was it about bravery. No longer was it something to be happy going through. Now it was devastating, ugly, and horrific, and war would never be the same. The making of the atomic bomb was just another step away from humanity towards a total warlike community. Atomic bombs, being the main source of fighting power now, were mass-produced, setting the world into fear. But after the first use of the bombs, they were never used again.
Two American Super Fortress bombers arrived over the Japanese city of Hiroshima on the world's most devastating military mission. The Enola Gay, with Colonel Paul Tibbets at the controls, was about to drop the first atomic bomb, a weapon conceived by a group of international scientists based at Los Alamos in the United States. So far, no one knew exactly what effect the bomb would have, either on the unsuspecting inhabitants below or on the crew of the plane itself. They were soon to find out.
As soon as the bomb went off, the whole inside of the airplane just lit up as if someone had set off a flashbulb. And then we had to wait, and this was our big worry, is what would the blast do when the blast got to the airplane? And finally the blast did arrive. It was like being in an ash can and getting someone kicking. And then we crowded to the window and saw just the whole city completely covered in smoke with this very tall mushroom cloud rising from it.
President Truman had already threatened the Japanese with a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. When the truth was revealed, his words seemed an understatement. Buildings vaporized, so did the clothes on people's backs. Was it a bomb that should never have been dropped? Some people thought so. Others argued that it shortened the war and kept the subsequent peace. One thing was not in doubt. Hiroshima taught mankind the awful truth about nuclear weapons and just what horror they could bestow.